Story 1. The emergency broadcast on my phone wasn't meant for my city. The alert came through at 2:11 a.m. That alone wasn't unusual. We get severe weather warnings, missing person alerts, emergency tests. Phone screaming in the middle of the night has become a weirdly normal part of modern life. But this one was different. Not the sound itself, but the way it lingered. My phone vibrated long after the alert tone ended, buzzing softly against my nightstand like it hadn't quite finished speaking. I reached for it, half asleep, squinting at the screen. Emergency broadcast local. That was the first thing that bothered me. It said local, but the message underneath didn't match anywhere I'd ever lived. The text was brief, too brief. Remain indoors. Avoid windows. Do not acknowledge outside voices. Below that was a location tag. It wasn't my city, not even my state. It was a name I didn't recognize at all. It's a city that, as far as I knew, didn't exist. I refreshed the screen, but the alert stayed. I checked the time. 2:11 a.m. exactly. Outside my apartment, the city was quiet. Not just nighttime quiet, no distant traffic, no sirens, no passing cars. It was the kind of heavy, deliberate silence that feels wrong. I stood up from my bed and started to cross to the window before I remembered the alert's warning. Avoid windows. I stopped just inches short of the glass. And that's when I realized something else. The streetlights outside weren't on. All of them. My entire neighborhood had gone dark. I live in a pretty dense area. Even at this hour, there's always some sign of life, someone walking their dog, a late bus, lights flicking on in nearby buildings. But now, there was nothing. Not even wind. It was like the whole neighborhood had just stopped breathing. Shh. I checked my phone again. No follow-up alert, no updates. Just that original message sitting on my lock screen like it was waiting for something. I unlocked my phone. The alert disappeared, and the vibration finally stopped. But the silence stayed. Then the first voice came from the street below, soft, calm, almost a calm. "Hello," it called. It didn't sound lost or frightened. It sounded patient, like someone who was confident they'd eventually get an answer. I took a step back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. The alert echoed in my head. Do not acknowledge outside voices. Then another voice joined the first. Then another. They were different tones, different ages, all speaking with that same gentle patience. They weren't calling for help, or calling names. Specific ones. Names of people who lived in my building. I heard my downstairs neighbor's name spoken clearly, then the woman across the hall. And then they said my name. My hands were shaking. I frantically turned on the television. No signal. I tried streaming apps, but they were stuck in an endless buffering loop. Radio stations were just low static. My phone still had service, but nothing would load, except for one thing. A new notification banner slid across the top of my screen. Emergency broadcast update. I tapped it. The text was longer this time, more detailed. This broadcast is not intended for your location. If you are receiving this message, do not panic, do not respond, do not correct the error. And then below that, another line appeared. They will attempt to confirm you. I swallowed hard. Confirm me how? Just then, a knock sounded at my door. Slow, careful. 3 taps. Not loud enough to be urgent, but not soft enough to be an accident. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, staring at the door. Another knock, then a voice right on the other side. Emergency services, it said. My phone buzzed again with another update. Do not trust unverified responders. They will sound correct. They will use proper terminology. The voice outside continued. Its tone professional, reassuring, almost bored. We're just checking on residents who received the alert by mistake. We need verbal confirmation that you're safe. My throat felt like sandpaper. The voice lowered slightly. We know you're awake. I made a terrible mistake. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway lights were off. It was completely dark. But I could still see someone standing there. Their outline was wrong. They were too tall for the hallway ceiling, and their face was blurry, not out of focus, just undefined, like someone had taken an eraser to their features. They leaned closer to my door. Please acknowledge, the voice said gently. My phone buzzed again. time it was a message from my building's group chat. Did anyone else get that alert? Replies flooded in. Yes. What's going on? Someone's knocking on my door. Then one final message appeared from a user I recognized. I answered, they're helping me. And then that user went offline, immediately. Another emergency broadcast arrived. Then another, and another, each one more frantic. They are adapting, do not engage, do not attempt to leave. I backed away from the door as something scraped lightly against it. Not a hand. Something longer, tracing the outline of the door, as if learning its shape. The final alert explained everything. Or it tried to. Some locations overlap. Some cities occupy the same space at different times. You are experiencing a bleed. A bleed between what? The alert finally gave the name of the city from the first message, that place that didn't exist. It said the city had been evacuated years ago, not abandoned, evacuated, because the residents there had started responding to voices no one else could hear, because emergency services kept arriving that weren't on any official roster. Until eventually, there was no one left to respond at all. It just needs you to answer. The calm voice outside my door said, "To confirm you belong here." The door handle rattled gently. I remembered another line from the alerts. Once confirmed, you cannot be unconfirmed. Then, one by one, the voices outside faded. I heard doors down the hall open, then close. Footsteps followed. And then, silence. The knocking at my door stopped. My phone vibrated one last time. Bleed containment in progress. If you did not respond, remain where you are. Do not seek explanations. Do not discuss the event. Outside, the streetlights flickered back on. Cars began to pass. Distant sirens returned. The city started breathing again. In the morning, several apartments in my building were empty. No police, no moving trucks. Just silence where people used to be. The building group chat was gone, deleted entirely. No one mentioned the alert. No one mentioned the voices. It was as if it never happened. I'm telling you this because tonight at 2:11 a.m., my phone buzzed again. No sound, just a single, long vibration. A notification preview appeared on the screen. It's emergency broadcast local. The city name is different this time. It's closer, more familiar. The message underneath is shorter. Confirmation, retry in progress. So if you ever get an emergency alert on your phone that isn't meant for your city, don't correct it, don't respond, and whatever you do, don't answer the voices, because some cities don't disappear. They just wait in the silence until someone answers. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Story 2. The night shift rule I was never supposed to read. The first time I saw the rules, I laughed. I'd just started my night shift job at the old Serenity Hills Library, a place so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. It was a dream gig for a student like mendless peace and access to every book I could imagine. The pay was decent too. My manager, a tired-looking man named Arthur, handed me a laminated sheet of paper on my first night. Just the usual stuff, he mumbled, not making eye contact. Lockup procedures, emergency contacts. You know the drill. I nodded, took the sheet, and he was gone before I could even say thanks. I settled in behind the massive oak circulation desk, the smell of old paper and wood polish filling the air. The library was empty, a grand, silent cathedral of knowledge. I scanned the list. First few rules were standard. Lock all doors at 9 p.m. sharp. Do not leave the front desk unattended. No food or drink near the archives. Boring. But then I got to the bottom of the page, where a section was crudely covered with black marker. It was a sloppy job. You could still make out faint traces of letters underneath. Curiosity, my old friend and worst enemy, took over. I held the sheet up to the desk lamp, tilting it this way and that. My heart did a little flutter. I could just make out the heading, Unofficial Night Shift Protocol. Below it, a single, horrifying rule was faintly visible. If you hear a book fall in the history section after midnight, do not go and check. Ever, I chuckled. A prank, had to be. A little something to spook the new guy. I tucked the list away and got back to my textbook, the silence of the library wrapping around me like a comfortable blanket. The hours ticked by peacefully. 9 o'clock came, and I dutifully locked the main doors. The enormous bolts sliding into place echoed through the cavernous hall. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, just me, my studies, and the sleeping books. Then, at 12:17 a.m., it happened. A solid, definitive thud. It came from the far back corner of the second floor, the history section. My blood ran cold. My first thought was the rule. My second thought was that it was ridiculous. It was probably just an old heavy book finally succumbing to gravity. That's all that happens. But the sound? It wasn't just a simple drop. It had weight, a finality. I sat frozen for a full minute, listening. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than before. Against every screaming instinct, I told myself to be rational. A book fell. That's it. I have to go pick it up. It's my job to keep the place tidy. If Arthur came in tomorrow and saw a valuable book on the floor, I'd be in trouble. I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from under the desk, its beam cutting a nervous path through the shadows. I walked past rows of silent shelves, my footsteps sounding unnaturally loud on the polished floor. I took the grand central staircase, my hand gripping the cold brass railing. The second floor was even darker and more imposing than the first. The air was colder up here. I navigated through the labyrinth of shelves, the flashlight beam dancing over the spines of countless books, fiction, science, philosophy, and then history. The section was at the very back, in a poorly lit alcove. As I got closer, a strange feeling washed over me, a feeling of being watched. The hair on my arms stood on end. I swept the light across the aisle, and there it was. Lying splayed open on the floor was a massive, leather-bound volume. Its pages were yellowed and brittle. It looked ancient. I knelt, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached out to pick it up, but then I saw the title embossed in faded gold leaf on the cover, The Forgotten Patrons of Serenity Hills. I'd never seen it before. It wasn't in the library's digital catalog. I would have remembered a title like that. I hesitated, my fingers hovering just inches from the cracked leather. The rule screamed in my mind. Do not go and check. But I was already here. What was the harm in just putting it back? I picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy. The pages were open to a chapter titled The Midnight Librarian. My eyes scanned the first few lines of elegant, archaic script. It described a librarian who worked here over a century ago, a man who loved his books so much that he never truly left. The story said he sometimes grew lonely and would try to recommend his favorite stories to the living. He would knock a book off the shelf, a silent invitation. If the night watchman found the book and put it back on the shelf without opening it, the spirit would be appeased and leave them in peace for the rest of the night. But if the watchman read from the book, the story stopped there. The rest of the page was blank. A cold dread, sharp and icy, pierced through me. This was insane. It was just a creepy old book, a piece of local folklore. I stood up, determined to put it back on the shelf and forget this ever happened. I scanned the shelves, looking for the empty spot where it belonged, but there was no gap. Not a single one. Every shelf was packed tight, covered in a thin layer of undisturbed dust. This book didn't fall from a shelf. Appeared my breath hitched. My breath hitched. I looked back down at the book in my hands. The page I had just read was no longer blank. New words were appearing, as if being written by an invisible hand, the ink a dark, glistening black. The new script was jagged, angry. It read, "You should not have read my story. Now you must become part of a new one." My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into absolute, terrifying darkness. I dropped the book. It hit the floor with a sickening thud, the same sound I'd heard earlier. And then, from the end of the aisle, a new sound. A soft, dry whisper. It's the sound of turning pages. Slowly, then faster and faster, coming from all around me. It was the sound of 1,000 books opening at once. A raspy, guttural voice whispered right next to my ear, a voice that smelled of dust and decay. "What story shall we read tonight?" I didn't wait for an answer. I ran. I stumbled through the darkness, shelves scratching at my arms, books tumbling down around me. The whispering followed. A chorus of ghostly voices reciting prose and poetry from 100 different tales, all weaving together into a symphony of madness. I scrambled down the stairs, fell, and crawled the last few feet to the front desk. My hands fumbled for the emergency exit key. The whispers grew louder, closer. You can't leave," the main voice rasped. "The story is just beginning." I finally found the key, jammed it into the lock, and threw the door open. I burst out into the cool night air, gasping, my lungs burning. I didn't stop running until the streetlights of my own neighborhood were in sight. And I never went back to the Serenity Hills Library. I called Arthur the next day and told him I quit. I didn't give a reason. He didn't ask for one. He's tired, knowing silence was all the confirmation I needed. Sometimes late at night when my house is quiet, I think I can hear it. A faint, distant whisper. The sound of a page turning. I've learned my lesson. There are some rules you don't break, and some stories that are better left unread. And if you ever find yourself working the night shift, and you hear a book fall in the dark, just leave it, please. Just leave it on the floor. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Stay safe out there. Story 3. I was the only one who heard the last train. No ribbon cutting, no news coverage, not even an updated schedule online. One night it was just a boarded up relic, rust creeping up the rails. The next morning, the gates were open, and I was late for work. I didn't think much of it at first. Cities revive forgotten spaces all the time. Renovations happen quietly, budgets shift, and suddenly an old place becomes useful again. But as soon as I stepped onto the platform, I knew something was wrong. The air felt paused, not cold, not warm, just suspended, like the station was holding its breath. I went to the ticket window and asked the clerk when the station reopened. She blinked at me, her face a perfect mask of polite indifference. "It never closed," she said. Her voice carried no confusion, no hesitation, just absolute certainty. I glanced up at the digital arrival board behind her. It flickered. There was only one train listed. It read, "Last service pending. No time, no destination, just pending." I boarded my usual commuter train that morning, dismissing the weirdness. Same car, same seat, same dull rhythm of steel on track. But halfway through the ride, the train slowed, then stopped. Not at a station, not at a crossing. We just stopped. The lights stayed on, the doors stayed closed. Then the conductor's voice crackled over the speaker. "This train will be making an unscheduled stop." That one sentence made my chest tighten. Unscheduled stops just aren't a thing. Not like this. The doors hissed open onto a platform I'd never seen before. No signs, no ads, no maps. Just bare concrete stretching into darkness on both ends. A few passengers from my car actually stood up and stepped off. I stayed in my seat, frozen. The conductor never appeared. The doors closed again, and the train pulled away. As we moved, I saw something carved into the platform wall, a list of names. Hundreds of them, all scratched in uneven handwriting. Some were crossed out, some circled. None of them were dated. That night, while brushing my teeth, I heard it. A distant horn. Low, mournful. A train horn. I live miles from any tracks, yet it sounded close enough to vibrate the mirror in my bathroom. A moment later, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Transit Authority app, an app I hadn't opened in years. Service update, last train approaching. There was no route number, no explanation, just that. The next day at work, I tried to ask around. My coworkers just shrugged. My neighbors laughed. "There hasn't been a night train in decades," one of them told me, patting my shoulder like I was crazy. But when I pressed further, when I asked if anyone remembered the old station being closed, their faces tightened. Their eyes slid away. It was like I'd said a forbidden word, crossed some invisible line they all knew about but me. So I went back to the station that evening after sunset. The lights were on, but they were dimmer than before, casting long, unsettling shadows. The ticket clerk was gone. The booth stood open and empty. I looked up at the arrival board. It showed the same listing, but it had changed. Last service arriving. I checked my watch. It was 11:58 p.m. The platform was completely empty, or so I thought. Then I saw them. They were standing perfectly still along the far end of the platform. Dozens of people. Men, women, different ages, all facing the tracks. None of them were speaking. None of them were even blinking. Their clothes looked outdated. Not like costumes, but just worn. Not like they were the only clothes these people had ever owned. I took a hesitant step closer. One of them, a man with tired eyes, turned his head, far too slowly. "You're early," he said. His voice was dry and raspy, like it hadn't been used in years. "I'm not waiting for anything," I replied, my own voice shaking a little. That earned me a smile. It wasn't a friendly one. "Everyone here is," he said, turning back to the tracks. Eventually, just then, the train horn sounded again. So much closer this time. The entire group straightened up in unison. No one panicked, no one smiled. They simply prepared, and I felt it then. A pull, not a physical force, but a conceptual one. Like something was scanning me, checking if I fit, if I belonged there with them. It emerged from the tunnel without any lights. A black silhouette sliding forward in the darkness. It had no windows, no markings, just doors. Dozens of them. And as the train coasted to a stop, each door aligned perfectly with one person on the platform. The doors slid open, and one by one, the people stepped forward. They weren't dragged or forced, they boarded willingly. As the last few people stepped on, a voice echoed from the train. It wasn't from a speaker, it seemed to come from everywhere at once, and it spoke a name, my name. The man who had spoken to me was still on the platform. He turned and gave me a slight nod. "Your stop," he said. I don't know what stopped me. Maybe instinct. Maybe pure terror. Or maybe it was the realization that none of the people who boarded looked relieved. They just looked. Resigned. I took a step back, away from the open door waiting for me. The door hesitated for a second, then slid shut. The train pulled away into the night, and the platform lights clicked off, plunging me into total blackness. I was alone. I scrambled up the stairs and back to the street. When I turned around, the station entrance was gone. There was just a solid brick wall where it had been moments before. The horn sounded again, but it was farther away now, receding into the distance. After that night, things started to change. It was subtle at first. Clocks in my apartment would skip a few minutes. The news reported transit delays blamed on unusual congestion. I started seeing missing persons notices posted around town, but they never had photos, always without photos. And I started seeing the same people everywhere. On buses, in grocery stores, standing on street corners, always watching the tracks, always waiting. A week later, my phone buzzed again. Service update. Last train rescheduled, and below it a new line. Passenger confirmation required. I deleted the app. The notification just came back a minute later. Started dreaming of trains. Endless cars with no windows, sliding through eternal night. And names whispered between stations that didn't exist. In every single dream, I'm standing on a platform. And in every dream, I'm late. I finally found an answer, buried deep in an old city archive. It was a scanned document from decades ago, a proposal for a pilot program, a containment solution. It was for people who no longer belonged where they were. People who had fallen out of sync with time. People who were forgotten long before they actually died. The train wasn't for transportation, it was for removal. The document ended with a chilling, handwritten note. Do not publicize service, do not explain departures. Those who notice the train are already listed. Listed where? I didn't have to ask. I already knew. Tonight the horn sounds closer than ever. The station is back. I can see its dim lights from my window waiting. My phone is vibrating on the table. Last service, boarding. If I don't go, I know it will just keep coming back for me. But if I do, well, I guess I won't need to worry about being late ever again. So if you ever hear a train at night that isn't on any schedule, if a forgotten station suddenly appears where one shouldn't be, and if you get a strange feeling like something is checking whether you still belong here, don't wait around, because the last train only comes for those who notice it. Once it knows your name, it never, ever forgets. Thanks for listening. Story 4. Everyone in my apartment building received the same dream. I didn't realize the dream was shared at first. I woke up at 6:17 in the morning, my heart racing, the sheets damp with sweat. The image was still clinging to the back of my eyes like smoke. It wasn't the kind of dream that just fades when you sit up. This one stayed sharp, heavy, like it had actual weight. In the dream, I was standing in the hallway of my apartment building. All the lights were off. Every single door was open. And something was breathing right behind me. I didn't turn around. I never do in dreams like that. I just sat on the edge of my bed, rubbing my temples, telling myself it was just stress. Nightmares happen, especially when you live alone, work long hours, and spend way too much time in your own head. That perfectly reasonable explanation lasted right up until I checked my phone. The building group chat had a new message. It was from someone on the 3rd floor. "This is going to sound weird," it said, "but did anyone else dream about the hallway last night?" I just stared at the screen. My first instinct was to scroll past it, pretend I never saw it. My second was to leave the chat entirely. But instead, I typed back, "What hallway?" The reply came almost immediately. All of them. Every floor. All the doors were open. My hands went cold. Suddenly, more messages started pouring in. Lights were off. Couldn't move. Felt like something was behind me. I hadn't told anyone about the breathing. I hadn't mentioned that part where I knew. I just knew that if I turned around, something irreversible would happen. But then, someone else typed, "Did anyone else feel like if they turned around it would follow them when they woke up?" I put my phone face down on the bed. I left my apartment an hour later than usual. I didn't want to check the hallway. It's the honest truth. When I finally opened my door, I hesitated, just listening. There were no footsteps. No other doors opening. Not even the chime of the elevator. Just quiet. The hallway looked completely normal. The lights were on. The doors were closed. But it felt watched. I locked my door twice before I left. By noon that day, nearly everyone in the building chat had responded. Different ages, different schedules, different floors, but the same dream. Always the hallway. Always the open doors. And always that feeling of something behind them. And one person mentioned a detail that made my breath hitch. Did anyone else hear breathing? Not loud, just close? I closed the app. The email from building management came that afternoon. It was polite. It's carefully worded. "Please be advised that emergency services were contacted this morning regarding a resident on the 5th floor. No name, no details. Just that the resident had passed during the night. The 5th floor, that was the floor from my dream. The one where the breathing had felt closest. That night, I tried not to sleep. Left all the lights on, the television playing quietly, the door locked. I fell asleep anyway. But this time, the dream was different. I wasn't just standing still. I was walking down the hallway. Every door was still wide open, but now I could hear something else. Whispering. Not words, just intent. The next morning, the group chat had changed. Someone had created a list. An unofficial, crowdsourced list of things we'd all noticed. The dream always happens between 3 and 4 a.m. It gets longer every night. People who talk about it in detail seem to sleep longer afterward. And one person didn't wake up. Later, someone added another bullet point, "Don't turn around." Her name was Elaine, 2nd floor. She was friendly, quiet, always said hello in the lobby. She posted a message at 2:48 in the morning. "I know what's behind us." No one responded. At 6:30 a.m., management sent another email. 2nd floor, medical emergency. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I saw the shadow of it on the wall. Not clearly. It's just the suggestion of something tall, with all the wrong angles, like it was trying to remember how bodies are supposed to work. The whispering grew louder. And then I realized something that made my chest tighten into a knot. The sound wasn't behind me anymore. It was coming from the open doorways. We figured it out way too late. The open doors weren't invitations for us to enter. They were exits. The thing in the hallway wasn't following us. It was making sure nothing escaped. One detail never changed in the dream. There were no elevators, no stairs. Just hallway after hallway, seemingly endless. Like the entire building had been flattened into a single, infinite corridor. Someone suggested the building wasn't the location of the dream. It was the container. Then the dream started bleeding into reality. I noticed it first in reflections. The big hallway mirror by the elevator felt deeper, like it was showing more space than should exist. At night, I swore I could hear breathing through my own door. Not from the hallway outside, from inside, like something was pressed flat against the other side, just waiting for me to sleep. At 3:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message in the group chat. It was from my own account. "Don't turn around. I was wide awake. I hadn't typed it. One resident claimed they stayed awake through the entire 3:24 a.m. Window lights on, caffeine, music blasting. They still dreamed, but they remembered fighting back, kicking, swinging. Their last message was a photo, a deep bruise on their shoulder. It was shaped like a hand with fingers that were far too long. Then someone found an old article online. Decades ago, our building had been repurposed. Before it was apartments, before it was offices, it was a sleep research facility. They were focused on shared dreaming, collective consciousness. They shut the whole thing down after an incident. No other details survived, just one line. Subjects reported a presence that learned faster when it was observed. By the 5th night, the dream had adapted. The thing in it didn't just stay behind us anymore. Sometimes it would appear in a doorway. Sometimes you'd see its reflection in a picture frame on the wall.
Always.
Just out of your direct view, always testing the rules. The final rule appeared in the chat without any explanation. No username attached, just text. If it reaches the end of the hallway, it will wake up. None of us asked what that meant. We all understood. People started moving out, those who could anyway. Some left in the middle of the night, others packed frantically during the day. But it didn't matter. The dream followed them. They reported it happening in hotel hallways, in hospital corridors, in any place with long walls and many doors. The building wasn't the source, it was just the origin. Last night in my dream, the hallway was shorter. As the doors were closing behind me one by one, the breathing was gone, because it was no longer behind me. It was walking beside me, matching my pace. Learning. I haven't slept since, neither have a few of the others who are left. We message each other constantly, trying to stay conscious to stay here, because every time one of us sleeps, the hallway in the dream changes, and we all know, eventually there will be nowhere left to stand.
Ow.
If this sounds familiar to you, if you've ever dreamed of a hallway you couldn't escape, if doors open where they shouldn't, if you wake up knowing something followed you partway back, don't turn around. And don't ever assume you're the only one dreaming, because some dreams don't belong to us, they just borrow us. And once they learn enough, they stop dreaming back. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to hear more. Story 5. I was assigned to moderate a forum that shouldn't exist. I didn't apply for the job. That's the part I still can't explain. Email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, buried between newsletters and spam. It looked legitimate, clean, formatting, corporate language, a familiar logo from a content moderation firm I'd freelanced 4 years ago. The subject line read, "Temporary moderation assignment." The duration was just 14 days, for a platform described as an internal community archive, with content classified as low risk and historical. The pay was surprisingly generous, and the deadline was tight. But it was the final line that stuck with me. Even then, please note, interaction is required. I should have deleted it. Instead, I replied. An hour later, my access credentials arrived. Username, temporary password, but there was no link, just instructions. Use the attached client. Do not attempt browser access. The software was tiny, lightweight. The interface was almost non-existent. When I launched it, the screen stayed black for a few long seconds, before text slowly faded in. Welcome, moderator. Below it, just 2 words. Archive status. Active. There was no branding, no timestamps, no visible user count, just threads. Hundreds of them. And they were all titled in a chillingly similar way. Each thread title felt like a confession. I noticed something last night. Does anyone else hear it breathing? This isn't sleep paralysis. It started copying my voice. The posts were a strange mix of old and new. Some were dated more than a decade back, so others had been posted just minutes ago. That shouldn't have been possible on a historical archive. The moderation guidelines were brief, disturbingly so. Flag content that encourages interaction. Remove posts that describe successful engagement. Do not respond emotionally. Do not reassure users. Maintain neutrality. But one line was highlighted and it sent a chill down my spine. We're not here to help them. That was new. I'd never seen a rule like that before. I clicked on the most recent thread to start. The opening post was short and unpunctuated. It started replying to my thoughts before I typed them. There was no username, just that one haunting sentence. Below it were dozens of replies, all variations of the same frantic warning. Don't answer it. Stop acknowledging it. Delete your posts and leave. The original poster replied only once more. I already answered, and then the thread was locked automatically. None of the content I reviewed violated any standard moderation policy. There was no violence, no threats, no graphic imagery, no explicit material. On paper, the forum was harmless. But reading it felt like standing too close to something impossibly tall and silent in the dark, like it could lean down and look at you at any moment. I tried to do my job. I flagged a post that described a detailed conversation with something that lived in reflections. The system accepted my report, and the post vanished. But then, it reappeared, edited. It was shorter, stripped down to a single, chilling sentence. It knows when you're paying attention. I hadn't authorized that edit. The system had done it on its own. On day 2, I found a thread titled, "To the moderator reading this." My heart jumped into my throat. The post was recent, just minutes old. You think you're outside this? I frantically checked the user metadata. There was nothing. No IP address. No creation date. No posting history. Just the text. You're closer than the others. I slammed the thread closed. It reopened itself. I revisited the guidelines, my hands shaking. One line I hadn't focused on before was now bolded. Reading is a form of interaction. That's when it clicked. The generous pay. The secrecy. They weren't moderating content, they were controlling exposure. Some threads didn't just lock, they vanished completely. No placeholder, no deletion log. When I searched for their titles, the system returned nothing. But hours later, I'd find references to them in other posts, like scars left behind in the conversation. I started tracking usernames manually. I noticed a pattern. Users who described prolonged interaction listening, responding, acknowledging they would stop posting within a few days. They weren't banned or deleted, they were just gone. Their final messages were all eerily similar. It's clearer now, I don't feel alone anymore. It doesn't need to ask. I kept digging, desperate for an answer. I found it in a buried thread written years ago by a former moderator. This place isn't support, it's insulation. The idea was horrifyingly simple. If people experiencing this phenomenon found each other, they'd compare notes. They'd learn its patterns. They'd understand it. And once it was understood, it would change, evolve. So the forum's purpose was to keep them isolated, confused, talking past one another, never getting a clear picture. And what was the phenomenon? No one called it a demon or a ghost or an entity. They only ever called it asterisk. It asterisk, because naming it made it sharper, more specific, more able to respond. Posts that used vague metaphors lasted longer. Posts that tried to define it ended abruptly. On day 5, it noticed me. The client software started acting strangely. Threads would reorder themselves while I was reading them. Replies appeared without me refreshing the page. Then, a notification popped up for the first time. New message direct. Moderators weren't supposed to get direct messages. My curiosity overrode my fear. I opened it. Contained a single sentence. You read slower when you're afraid. I felt the air leave my lungs. Checked the message timestamp. It was marked 3 hours in the future. I hadn't even been online that long yet, but the system knew I would be. That night, my webcam light flickered on. Just once. Then it went dark. I hadn't touched it. I immediately covered it with tape. A moment later, the forum client chimed softly. A new thread had appeared at the top of the feed. Its moderator is present. Then another thread appeared, this one mirroring my room perfectly. It described the exact position of my desk, the angle of my lamp, the window right behind me. If you stay very still, the post read, it will think you're listening. I slammed my laptop shut, but the cooling fan kept running, a low, persistent hum in the silent room. I finally understood the rule. You are not here to help them. Helping meant warning them. Warning meant giving them clarity. And clarity led to adaptation. The forum wasn't being cruel. It was a firewall. And the moderators were the heat sinks, drawing the attention, absorbing the focus. I found the final post from the moderator who came before me. It was saved as an unpublished draft. It learns faster through people who observe carefully. It read, "That's why they choose us." The draft ended right there, mid-sentence. On day 14, my last day, the system prompted me. Assignment complete. Final action required. A single thread was highlighted on my screen. It had no title. Side was just one line. You don't need the forum anymore. Below it, a single button. Confirm. I hovered my mouse over it for what felt like an eternity. I understood now. Moderation wasn't the job. Graduation was. If I confirmed, I wouldn't need the forum, because I'd no longer be an observer. I'd be on the inside. I didn't click it. I yanked the power cord from the wall. I uninstalled the client, reformatted the hard drive, and then physically destroyed it. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I see new threads forming in my thoughts. Fully formed, perfectly titled, and I know somewhere someone is reading them. So if you ever stumble across a place like that, a forum where people describe the same impossible thing, where the posts feel unfinished and the moderators never comfort anyone, leave. Don't read another word, because attention is the only permission it needs. And the more carefully you read, the clearer you become to it. Thanks for listening.